So the theme for our second roundtable discussion is Sharing New Visions, the future of the World Heritage Convention. This session will be moderated by Professor Roland Bernecker. He is a visiting professor in culture management at Brandenburg University of Technology. Professor Bernecker worked as Secretary General of the German Commission for UNESCO from 2004 until 2019. He took part in the negotiation of the legal instruments of UNESCO for the Intangible Cultural Heritage 2003 and the Diversity of Cultural Expressions 2005. So I have the pleasure to invite Professor Berneck. The floor is yours. Thanks.
I think we just move, I would call the panel, the members of the panel on stage so that we can open the discussion. This is Mechtlid Rössler, Joseph King, I have to check Birgitta Ringbeck, Elisabeth Corinthe, Juan Carlos Barrientos Garcia, and of course, Lazar Ilundu. I think he had to go out for a moment for an urgent phone call that happens to directors of World Heritage Centers. But maybe somebody can give him a sign that we would like to have him here on the panel. Okay, maybe we can start. I'm glad to say that in the last discussion, in the last session, we had the two notions of peace and sustainability that came out as important centers, giving perspective to the World Heritage Convention. Ilundu, we are waiting for you. Not waiting for you, but we're inviting you to join us here on the panel. And I think these two notions are very important when we now in this session want to address the question of the future. Because the 50th anniversary, of course, is like in real life, when you have marriages and other anniversaries, you look back and but finally you ask, where are we heading to? What is waiting for us in the future? And to do this, we have a very eminent panel here. I do not have to present you longly. I think Lazar Ilundu, director of the World Heritage Center. We have Mechtlid Rössler, who was his, sorry, yes, I'm confused. Yes, was his predecessor as director of the World Heritage Center. We have Joe King, who has already been presented, senior director in ICROM Rome. And then we have Birgitta Ringbeck, of course. You have been mentioned a lot today already for good reason. You have been over 2 years coordinator in Germany for all World Heritage matters. And I always like to say that I think in Germany you are the person who knows most about World Heritage. But now, of course, there is Mechtlid Rössler who came back to Germany, so it's the two of you. Maybe. And then I'm glad that we have two younger experts, Elisabeth Corinthe. She's from the Berlin Senate Department for Culture and Europe and Vice President of Blue Shield in Germany. And Juan Carlos Barrientos Garcia, Coordinator of the Educational Program of European Heritage Volunteers, a wonderful program. We had students joining it this summer. And a PhD candidate at the DFG Research Group at Bauhaus University of Weimar and Technical University of Berlin. I would say a few words to start, because as I said, when we look into the future, we have to think back to the context in which the World Heritage Convention has been constructed. And it was in 1972 was a year where many things happened. It was in the middle of the Cold War. We have to remember this. I still remember as a teenager, there were these discussions. You were reading about how often the nuclear arsenal that was, let's say, divided by the superpowers would be able to annihilate humanity entirely. Not just once, but 2 times or 3 times. These were really things we have forgotten. Let's say this kind of statistics. And in 1972, interestingly, the German bunker in Ahrweiler was finished. And it's interesting because it was constructed to give protection to some, I think, 3,000 governmental people to go there and have shelter in the case of a nuclear attack by the Soviet Union at the time. And it was a huge bunker, and it has been used. They made exercises really. We were close somehow in that year, 1972, to this incredible event of, let's say, of nuclear war. And when I went there, I was really stupefied by the fact that the speech that the president of Western Germany would have held in the case of a nuclear attack had already been drafted. It was already there. You can see it. It is on display. So the text had already been prepared for the president of Germany at the time. We have to think about these things. This was the context, let's say, of the creation of the World Heritage Convention. In December 1972, Apollo 17 shot this iconic image of the blue marble, you may imagine, which gave us an impression to see the Earth from the outside as this vulnerable planet, as this fragile biosphere that needed protection. It was shot in the same year. And of course, in 1972, this, let's say, this fragility of the planet and of the biosphere was captured into other events. One was the publication of The Limits to Growth, which has been sold in 30 languages and in 30 million copies, which was the Club of Rome report, of course, in 1972 about the limits we had for development on the planet. And the first UN conference on the environment took place in Stockholm. Human environment, and UNEP was founded. So in 1972, the first time the environment, the question of sustainability, the possible destruction of the environment, of human environment, today we would say environment, was put on the agenda of the United Nations. So this was a context which a bit captures the spirit of, let's say, peace and sustainability. And today, again, we are in a situation where we are confronted more, I think, than we would have wanted with questions of these in these dimensions. This is why I would like to start with the Director Ilundu, with Lazar, because we are living in difficult times, I would say, really challenging times. And you have a position which is as prestigious as it is complicated. And I think one of the achievements, where you're laughing because you know, you know that it's true. One of the huge achievements of UNESCO, especially with the World Heritage Convention, is to change the narrative of heritage, and to project it from a nationalistic narrative, that the heritage is something you have as a nation and you compete with other nations, and to change that narrative and to create a narrative of a universal common heritage of humanity, which is something really amazing, which is going against originally how in modern times heritage and conservation have been conceived when you go back to the French Revolution. Now, seeing the current situation where we have all these new populist nationalisms, the growing, I would say, imperial ambitions which are there geopolitically, the fragmentation of the global political arena again. And of course, it was mentioned, we have a country that is chairing the World Heritage Committee that is waging war against another country, member state of UNESCO. So these are strange times, and I would simply ask, what is your mindset? What are your feelings in this difficult situation, and what is the role for UNESCO you see in these challenging times?
Okay. From where do I start? Maybe first by because I think you raised many questions. You went back to the very, the origin of the ideas of the founders of the World Heritage Convention, and I think there are many specialists here with us, Mechtlid, Joe, who have witnessed it better than I. They can tell you more about it. You spoke about the narrative. And then I want to start, before we move on the strange, complicated, or complex time that we are living in, and the fact that I'm having more white hairs now. Yeah. I think one thing which is exceptional with this convention, first of all, is that it had defined, in my view, this idea that countries can come together to protect what they consider as not only the heritage of one community or one country, but the heritage of the humanity. And this heritage can be cultural heritage or natural heritage. And I think this first idea, I think we can say 50 years after today, it's still valid. It's still important. And I think that makes the World Heritage Convention unique in its sense. And I think my friends can speak about it more than I do. The reason why I'm saying that is because there has been a point where World Heritage has, there has been lots of reflection on not only understanding the values of this heritage that the world is trying to protect, but also its significance. And there, the significance is the way you look at the heritage of another one, or the way they look themselves at their own heritage. And Joe said something in his presentation about don't do it without me. It means that I think the issue of the significance is important, but the issue of significance of World Heritage is not to promote nationalism, but it's to understand why this heritage is important and why people think it has to be protected. It's not to use it for any propaganda, and that's not the essence of World Heritage, in my understanding. And we are not defending it, but this reflection has taken us to maybe understand that because of the fact that there is this importance of the significance of the heritage and the role that the heritage plays in a community life, it has broadened the range of heritage. That's why at one point, these new categories started arriving from the wonders that were the Taj Mahal, the pyramids of the Louvre, pyramids in Egypt and others that got inscribed at the beginning, to other types of heritage that are as important as those heritage, and where it's not only about making sure that you have monumental cathedrals or churches or palaces, but that you also have what is really important in terms of protecting the cultural traditions of the people and what makes them, represented. And that's where you had these categories on itineraries, cultural landscapes, sacred forest, and many others that arrived. That's why you have sites also that are mixed sites. And I think this is an advantage for the future of World Heritage, because the moment you take it in consideration, you understand that World Heritage, and then it's a source of resilience. It's not only to admire the beauties of the world, it's also to make this World Heritage play a role in the social development and economic life of the people. And this is for the future. And to finish, on the complex time, in my view, I think the governance of the World Heritage has engaged in a reflection. And this reflection is to try to see how they can avoid this by fixing some guidelines. The recent discussion on sites of recent memory goes in this direction to avoid to bring into the World Heritage, things that are conflictual, but things that brings everyone together. And I think this is also the reason why, and I'll finish by that one, that you're right, we are living in a complex, difficult time because of the war. But it's not only the only thing that keeps us. We have to continue the discussion on this. But we have to look at it globally because, like I said, World Heritage gives us the possibility of having an inclusive approach to the future of our planet and the future of our humanity. That's my thoughts.
Yeah. Since we have you here, I have to ask a second, I think, very important question, especially for many of the students we have at BTU, and many of them are here or watching this event. Because in celebration, there is always as well the question of possible criticism towards the invention, because it's not all wonderful and not all success. There's a lot of success we have seen. One of the most, let's say, sharpest critiques that have been made in the past was by Lynn Meskel in this perspective of the post-colonial, let's say, discourse we are having, to what extent the creation of UNESCO itself and then the development of the World Heritage Convention is, let's say, somehow to be seen, as she puts it, an attempt to protract, as she says, the withering colonial rule of the West, kind of a continued colonization in disguise. So her diagnosis is that the World Heritage Convention can be read in the kind of a Machiavellian perspective, I would say, as an attempt of the West to continue, let's say, its colonial rule. And you're the first African director of the World Heritage Center, so I think you're in a good position to maybe comment on this.
Yes, and first of all, I don't know if Professor Lynn Meskel is listening to us.
Maybe.
But if you're listening to us, Lynn, please understand my answer. I think, like I said, this convention, when you read the text of the convention, the text of the convention, in my understanding, does not give this understanding that it favors a colonialism approach. No. I'm not saying this because I don't want people to misquote me, but I'm saying this because I do believe that this instrument, it's an instrument that is still relevant today. Now the question is, how do we use the instrument? And then you ask me, what is one of the difficulty? And of course, in my position as the first African, like you say, I think, of course, today we still have this issue of the imbalance of the list. It's not a criticism, but when you celebrate, you take stock of some of the achievement, and you look at what is still to be to improve. And I think the issue of the imbalance, it's an important issue. We have started discussing it in 1994 when the global strategy was approved. I was not there, but some of the friends here were there. And in 2022, we still have not solved the problem. So we still have not solved the problem. It doesn't mean that the problem cannot be solved. It means that maybe it's now time to really tackle the issue, because like I always say, it's like you are having many countries in a dining room, and just some of them are sitting around the table and enjoying the food. If we consider that the food is inscribing the site on the World Heritage List. But we need to make sure that, you know, this is inclusive, that it's possible, because the very essence of the convention is, of course, to represent the diversity of all the cultures and regions of the world. So I'm not in a position to say that there is a colonial approach and then there is a way of reversing it so that we decolonize the convention. The convention, it's a relevant, credible tool, and everyone has the possibility to implement it, and it's a relevant tool. And I think what needs now to do for those regions where it has not been effective in all, is to cooperate, to support, to capacitate, you know, all what is important, and that's the relevance of the multilateralism. And I wanted to finish with that one.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very clear statement. Yeah, Mechtlid, you wrote a book with Christina Cameron about the origins of the convention. A very, very interesting book. Most of you will know it, obviously. It's by, you call it the vision that was there at the beginning. And I would like to ask you, because now you look back at the work you have done at UNESCO. You've been there for quite a while. How, in your for your understanding, has the relation between state parties and their political representatives, UNESCO staff, experts from civil society, and the general public developed over the time? Is it still, do you feel that it's still the original vision that motivates the actors in the World Heritage System?
Not an easy one. Thank you very much. I think the vision is still there. It's really an instrument which is probably the most beautiful mandate you can have within the UN system as a whole, to work on sites which are so unique, so outstanding, that they have to be preserved by all of humanity. And it's very much linked to the peace mandate of the UN and of UNESCO. Now, over time, this has changed a lot, as you can imagine, because we discussed there's a lot of nationalism coming in. We defend our files, whether they are of outstanding universal value or not. We don't care that much about what the advisory bodies say. We just fight for our seat in the World Heritage Committee to defend our files. The whole issue of politicization is, especially since the years 2010, very much visible. And it's a deep regret for me that this is the case, but there are many people around the world defending the original vision and the mandate of this World Heritage Convention. And these are the people on the ground. These are the people who have jobs due to World Heritage. These are the people who fight with passion to safeguard the last reefs on Earth. And this is a part which I also want to mention, because we have a triple crisis at the moment: climate change, biodiversity crisis, and the pollution crisis, which, by the way, began the discussions in 1972, when you read the preamble of the World Heritage Convention, which is a very beautiful document, because it imagines threats which are beyond threats of traditional decay of heritage sites. So the founding fathers already looked very much into the future, and I think there are many people around the globe, they still believe in this instrument, so I fully agree with Lazar, but I think we need to go back to the principles. We need to have experts on the delegations of states parties going into the committee. In the early days, the committee room was the room where substance was discussed, not political speeches given. It happened sometimes. This was the exception. Nowadays, there are only and I think, Joe, you mentioned it this morning, because of the live transmission, there are pre-written speeches given, and there's no fundamental debate, which happened in the early days in the committee room. And there was also this exchange between the experts from the World Heritage Centers, from the center, the experts coming from the states parties, experts from the advisory bodies, NGOs in the room. We all went for dinner and we had these discussions. It became, if you want, Roland, it became more separated. And this is not what the convention envisaged. On the contrary, is to come together and jointly preserve the most outstanding places on Earth.
You mentioned by younger people that are interested to dedicate their skills and their intellect to heritage, to the World Heritage Convention, many of them in BTU. If now, by the task you had at UNESCO and which you have currently, the kind of professional work you're doing there is very complex. I would like to ask you, what are the competencies you would tell younger people, students, emerging experts, the competencies that are needed, not only to survive in such an environment, but to create impact, to fight for your values? And how can you get these competencies?
Very easy answer. Do things with passion and do things you believe in. Otherwise, you are not credible. So it's a very easy thing. Study heritage studies if you're really interested, not just to get a job, but if you're really interested to defend the values of those places. Then, of course, a good background. You need to have a good background. When I studied in 1978, we didn't have heritage studies around the world. So that's something which also evolved, interesting enough, with the World Heritage Convention. So you have much more possibilities to go into these fields, but also you need to have other skills today. You need to have intercultural skills, you need to know about the world, go beyond your own background, go and see the world, work at the World Heritage Site, volunteer somewhere, really get yourself into the system wherever you are, and exchange with others. Nowadays, it's much easier. You can attend from our World Heritage, a Globinar, you can exchange with site managers around the world. I wrote my first email in 1992, and I was the first one in UNESCO, okay? The world has changed, you have other possibilities, but also a part of it, you need to speak the languages, it's not possible. That's, by the way, a recommendation I have also to World Heritage site managers. When I go to the sites and I read the information only in German, it doesn't work for World Heritage. It is to share with the world. So you need to have those skills to be able to share with the world. So this is the short answer to a long discussion I would like to have with many of the young people, and I think that's for the time being what I want to say.
Thank you. Excellent. I would like to come to Joe King. You're an architect and an urban planner, now a senior manager in ICOM, and seeing the breadth of your experiences, I would like to ask you a more fundamental question. Against the backdrop of current global developments, do you think cultural heritage, is it more an integrating or more a divisive factor?
I think the answer to that is both. I think it has a potential to be more integrating, and I think it has a potential to be more divisive. Depends on how. It depends on who. It depends on who's using it, and it depends on how they're using it. I think we like to think that it's integrating, and I think we, as a profession, heritage profession, are trying to integrate it into a much wider landscape, if I can use that word. I am an urban planner. When I studied urban planning, I'm old now. When I studied urban planning, nobody was doing planning for historic areas in that way. The thing is, we've managed to integrate heritage concerns into that. Disaster risk management, we've managed to integrate concerns for heritage into the larger field of disaster risk management. Culture and nature, as I mentioned already before, we're starting to try to integrate. When I started in this convention in 1997, we used to go drinking with IUCN, ICOMOS and ICROM. We used to go out and have dinner with IUCN. We never collaborated on projects. We never collaborated on now we're running programs together. We're doing things together. So the potential for integration is there, but at the same time, the potential for conflict, for actually using heritage as a means of promoting conflict and saying, well, this is mine, it's not yours, is also there. And I think we need to try to we need to try to steer the narrative toward the integration and away from the destruction. Can I say one other thing on this though? And I would, and this actually goes back to some of the stuff that was said before. We don't need to just give a narrative. We don't need to just do storytelling. We do need to give narratives, and we do need to give storytelling. We also need to listen. And that's actually something that's often missing from a lot of the discussions that I have here. Oh, we need to explain to a community why this is important. We need to explain to this group of people why they should be protecting it in this way or that way. No, we need to go to a community and we need to say what's important to you. And we need to go to a community and say, what are your needs? What are your problems? We need to, that's another competency, if I may add to your list, Mechtlid, listening, learning how to listen before we speak. And I think that's actually something really important.
It was an excellent advice. Yeah. I read that you are an expert on governance. I find the question of governance extremely important. I think a lot of what we have been discussing today is about the question of governance. And in the book you will find a section on governance, global governance. Now, as a representative of one of the 3 advisory bodies foreseen in the convention, what would your wishes be for the future of the governance in the so-called World Heritage System?
My wishes?
Your wish,
what will actually happen, or what are my wishes? First of all, I'm not an expert on governance.
Okay.
Everything I know about governance, I actually know from the World Heritage, from working 25 years in World Heritage. I think Mechtlid's actually said it, at least to a certain extent, and Lazar's said it already to a certain extent. I think the governance of the convention has moved more toward the political. It's moved more toward, let's say, defending one's interests, defending one's region's interests, because also sometimes there's regional interests at play there, and less toward what I actually think is the main, if you actually, look at the title of this convention. This convention is not called the World Heritage Convention. Probably most people in this room think that it's called the World Heritage Convention. It's not. It's the convention for the protection of the world's cultural and natural heritage. It's about protection. And so what I would like to see in terms of the governance is I would like to see a return toward having a committee that is most interested in the protection of the heritage, not just the listing of the heritage. Listing is part of protection because you can't protect something if you don't know that it's there. But having a committee that actually is a committee of expertise. It can also have politicians on it. It's not, I mean, this is a state party convention. If you want to drive politics out of World Heritage, you need a different convention. Because that's not what the governance of this convention is set up to do. The convention lays out very clearly it's a state party convention. But the key is to push states parties to make sure that they actually have the right expertise on the committee, on their delegations to the committee, to be able to actually have a protection-oriented governance.
Yeah, we agree that you could express a wish because it's a good wish, but how realistic it is, I think we can have our own opinion about this. Birgitta, by you, I think you're an expert in the question of how to reconcile national motivations, national interests, with what we call the spirit of the vision, original vision of the convention, because you have been dealing with that for Germany and with the 16 federal states. And what is your experience? How hard is it to reconcile national or Länder interests, regional interests in Germany with the spirit of the convention?
Yeah, of course, it is hard, so no doubt. But I think not to give an advice, but maybe to consider a little bit about the current situation. And I like to include former, current, and future experts as well. For me, it's quite clear we are talking too much about the World Heritage List. We have to talk more on the main topics of the World Heritage Convention, and that is protection and conservation, as just mentioned by our colleague from ICRAM. So, and for me, and have a look to the operational guidelines. So these operational guidelines are only talking about nominations. So you do not have operational guidelines, for instance, with regard to protection and preservation. And for me, I'm always astonished, because if there's a threat to a German World Heritage Site, the question is not, do we protect and conserve the World Heritage Site? The question is, do we lose the World Heritage status? That is the only question, and therefore I think we should not talk too much about narratives. We should just talk about that, what is at the heart of the convention, and that is conservation and protection. And our duty is to hand over the World Heritage Sites as we got them from the last generation, and not to invent or invite or put or add a modern layer or a layer which we support, of which we think it is necessary to the World Heritage. And for instance, for me, sometimes at the moment I'm speechless. Each and every World Heritage Site, the first thing which is done after the inscription is to build a World Heritage Center, because interpretation is the most important thing. No, conservation and protection is the most important thing. And I am watching that a lot of sites did not regard and did not respect the conservation issues when they have to build a information center. So they are sometimes, I cannot believe that people who, and of course the World Heritage Convention is a convention for monument protection and nature conservation. It is not a convention on awareness building. Yeah, awareness building may be, but for instance, it is not a convention which focuses alone on interpretation. And therefore, I think we have to come back to the heart of the convention, and that I underline it again. It is protection and conservation, and we have to our duty and our legacy. We have to hand over the legacy to the next generation, and they have the right to get these legacies in the same with the same conditions as we got it.
Let me ask another question, a bit easier probably. You have been to many committee meetings of the World Heritage Committee. Do you know how many it was approximately?
More than 20.
More than?
More than 20.
More than 20. What would you say?
Maybe some more with the extraordinary sessions.
How important is the human factor in, because somehow we have the feeling there is a family, there is a World Heritage family, there are people involved in the system, as we call it. They meet each other, they have dinner, they cooperate or not. How important is the human factor in, let's say, making this system work? And maybe you could add, I don't know, do you have a nice anecdote to tell them, maybe the best experience you had in a World Heritage Committee meeting?
The best thing, of course, it is different. I think it's difficult to answer, because if you are the focal point of a state party, it is a completely different position in comparison with the experts who are free, more or less. Because I had a task and I was paid for this task.
Mm-hmm. But there was a human dimension to it, no?
There was a human dimension, yes. And this morning I said, okay, without the World Heritage community, I wouldn't have survived the last 20 years. And I think that was, even if, okay, it was my task to push sometimes something forward, of which I was not that convinced. But if you're the focal point, that is your position. So on the other side, I think it was really great. After the decision was taken, then everyone spoke again with you, and the friendship did not suffer from the different positions. And Mechtlid, we do have had some critical issues. Yes, we survived Dresden together, so I think that was for me up to now. It is. I don't know how I survived it, but I survived it. But the other thing was Cologne Castle redlisted in 2004. And for me, that were really, I think the most important cases for me were the red-listed sites in Germany, not the inscribed sites, because to accept that a German site was the first one which was deleted, the first cultural one, a year before, I think Oman, the natural site was delisted. That was, I think I learned a lot, and for a long time, the delisting of Dresden helped me a lot afterwards, because no one in Germany at that time would see again a delisting, and that was really a good basis for my work and for keeping the standards of the World Heritage List in Germany. I think that, and I do not wish anyone to suffer under a delisting process. But on the other side, I think it was really helpful. And I'm a little bit proud that we accepted that, because a lot of people asked me, and I said, I'm saying always that there's a life after the listing. And for me, it was quite important, for not for me as a person, but for me as a focal point, that we were after the delisting still accepted in the scientific community as well. So, and of course, I was member of a lot of experts panels, for instance, afterwards in Istanbul and some others. And that was an experience which was bad, of course, but in the end, it was very helpful. And I think that is, therefore, I do not understand why such a lot of state parties fight against red listing, because it is really, it is a tool to help you, and it is a forum to help you. Therefore, if I had a wish, I would wish that more state parties do not fight against red listing.
Thank you for sharing that personal experience. I think it's important to appreciate that the work we do in the sector, especially of international relations, where there are these cultural distances, it is important to have these human networks, to listen to each other, to understand each other, and that we have contacts we can rely on when things become more critical. And as you said, there are emotions involved as well in this kind of work. Elisabeth and Juan Carlos, but we have here, this is an intergenerational panel somehow, because we have, let's say, former...
What means former? Do we have to stop thinking?
No, it's that you had...
I thought once...
Yeah, you continue to do interesting things. I'm sure about that. But let's say in a professional point of view, let's say from a certain function, as an amount of involvement into an institution, we have, let's say, different layers here, I would say. Just take it like that. And now we come to the more emerging younger experts. Elisabeth, you studied Near and Middle Eastern Studies, and Juan Carlos, you are trained as a lawyer, if I've understood correctly. What was your motivation to professionally focus on heritage and more precisely on World Heritage? Because you both have the Master of World Heritage Studies. Maybe Elisabeth, you start. What was your motivation?
Yeah, so that's quite easy to answer. I started studying Near and Middle Eastern studies quite late, in my late 20s, at a time when the war in Syria broke out, which meant that I had a focus on archaeology, which meant that in the years that followed, many of the heritage that I studied would be damaged, destroyed, or illicitly trafficked. And that kind of led me into thinking more about the connection between politics and archaeology. But it's also a personal note. Years later, when I arrived in Berlin and started working at the Syrian Heritage Initiative within a team where I was the only German, looking at the documentation of endangered heritage in Syria, assessing the damages of the city of Aleppo, what happened was that roughly at the same time I started documenting the history of my grandparents, who fled 2 times actually in their life, and had seen the destruction of Berlin. And this factor kind of sparked a lot of discussions within our team, talking with a community that had just escaped a war, talking about a city that had recently been destroyed, in a city that had been destroyed before and had been rebuilt. So the question for me was always, how can we protect cultural heritage in the midst of all the other things that are happening during a war? Also considering the long-term impact it has on people, not only of the generation affected, but the generations that followed. So this is how I got stuck in the World Heritage field.
Very good, excellent. Yeah, Juan Carlos, for you?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I'm very honored to be part of this distinguished panel representing the younger generations. So to be allowed to be sitting with you and sharing, this is very special, I think, for our generation, which is very well represented here in this event. I would say that most of my friends are working also as part of the volunteer staff here at the event from the World Heritage Studies in BTU Cottbus. I come from a small country, Honduras, and we only have 2 World Heritage sites in spite of being a country rich in a lot of beauty. And I didn't really understood why this was it until I came to BTU Cottbus and I studied World Heritage Studies and I understood the process. The difficulties in inscribing sites because of the economic factor and the political factors. And, but as a lawyer, which was my previous training, I could also see the World Heritage Convention from the perspective of being it a legal instrument. And not just any legal instrument. It's, I would say, in the heritage conservation field in the world, it's the most important instrument which has enshrined under international law this unique concept or notion that heritage belongs to all humankind. And this is very unique because this convention has been ratified by almost all nations in the planet. And I think the relevance of the convention as a legal instrument maybe is not well understood because it is an element of international law. So we are called, the state parties are called to honor it as an obligation. And well, this is, I think, from the legal perspective as a lawyer, what I've discovered from the World Heritage Convention.
You work in the European Heritage Volunteers organization, which is a wonderful work you do. What is your feeling, the young people that get involved and dedicate their time and come to you and have these projects? What is their motivation? Is it more practical? Is it the concept of heritage? Are the values linked to heritage? And what do you think would be needed to be done to keep this link between the heritage of the past and the younger generations?
Well, I think this is something I also discovered when I was in BTU Cottbus. I discovered this amazing program called European Heritage Volunteers. So I started as a volunteer, and now I'm part of the staff. And I'm very proud to be part of this initiative that has been well, created and led by our director, Dr. Bert Ludwig, who's probably here or not. He has dedicated his life to this effort, and he has transmitted to us, all the participants and the volunteers, this passion and initiative to take part in the field of heritage conservation. I am, as I said, from Honduras, but I am here working at European sites, protecting what would be geographically our European sites, but in essence are humankind heritage sites. So this is the relevance of this program because many of us come together with other young heritage professionals from around the world to share this experience together of working for heritage and doing something. to protect heritage. European Heritage Volunteers has this amazing program that creates training courses and projects around Europe to provide to the young students and young heritage professionals an opportunity to go out there in the field, to get to know heritage sites from the perspective of the locals, to talk to the stakeholders there, to go to this little village in Kotor Bay in Montenegro and meet the community leaders and learn from them what's needed there and to do something about it. So this is a unique opportunity for many students who come out of the university halls and go into the field and try to understand what's out there in the future of careers. So they get to meet with instructors who teach them, who are conservators or restorers or people who are already doing this outside. They meet the site managers, they meet a local community, and this is something that's very important to transmit this to the new generations. And this kind of experiences that we have with European Heritage Volunteers is amazing because sometimes it's life-changing, which is what happened to me when I was working on a site in Albania, helping restore the roof of a church. And this was a life-changing moment for me because I understood I had taken the right decision in going to the heritage field and trying to do something about it. So our volunteers are usually people who still have this spark, this idealism, and this is something that's representative of all of the people who are joining our program. And these are the new generations of young heritage professionals that are hoping to take over and to continue to advance this work. For example, I think we have here present also several European Heritage Volunteers, young heritage professionals who are here amongst in the audience, working as the staff volunteers of the conference. We have some partners here as well who have been supporting the realization of this program. So in general, I think this is we are a very good representative sample of the younger generations of heritage professionals. Just this summer, for example, we had over 26 projects and training courses around Europe, and we had there the presence of participants from 56 different nationalities from 5 different continents. So it's amazing how we all come together to view heritage as a bridge maker between cultures and as a connector between different nationalities and a reason why we all come together.
We have to come to a conclusion. I think I still would like to ask Elisabeth a question. Since you studied Near and Middle Eastern studies, you are used to conflicts. What do you think seeing the current gloomy outlook with war, fragmentation of the international community, climate change, what do you think heritage could contribute to improve the human condition?
Well, I would say let's look at the gloom and try to understand it, and I think heritage plays a key role in that. If we think of archaeological heritage and what it tells us is that we have lived in a history of humankind that is filled with war. And that's quite a disturbing understanding out of that archaeology tells us. But it also gives us an opportunity. It gives us an opportunity to look at the setting of catastrophes and conflicts and gloom, as you say it, and understand how we can navigate through it the best possible ways, understanding that crises happen again and again, that in our institutional history we will most probably go from one crisis to the other, and if we're lucky we have time in between to recover, but in most cases that's just simply not the case. So if we look at the setting of conflicts, archaeology can tell us how we can navigate through it. It warns us, and also it gives us frameworks to think of strategies how to mitigate and prevent the effects it has on both people and heritage, and then as we are moving from one cycle to the other, maybe recovering faster in the end. So I think heritage plays a key role in that. But it's up to us, of course, to understand it as that as well.
Thank you. I would still like to make a last round with one or two sentence answers, because we have talked about the spirit and the vision of the World Heritage Convention. I call it World Heritage Convention now to make it easier. In this world of crisis, and maybe you make a short answer, and we can start maybe there and come over here. So you will have the why is World Heritage still relevant in this world of crisis, and what could be done to uphold this original spirit, this original vision of the convention? Maybe Joe, you start. 3 maybe, if that helps.
I can do that. No, I think, actually, excuse me, can you repeat the question again? Repeat again?
Yeah, what the relevance of World Heritage today in this world of crisis, and what can be done to uphold this vision?
So I think the relevance is that it's a convention that is meant to be creating collaboration between countries. I think I always talk about the World Heritage Convention as a convention that reinforces collaboration between different countries. And I think it can be done around, culture can be, not always, can be a safe space to do that around. And it's a way to promote that kind of cooperation and peace building. And I think that's what we need to do. How can we make sure that that happens? You know, honestly, I don't have a good answer for you. I mean, I think we need to work together. We need to try to put the differences behind us, and we need to try to find common areas of interest and use those to slowly build a collaborative approach between countries.
Thank you, Elisabeth.
Yeah, I would maybe add to that the role of communities. I think this is something that we really have to look at, how we give space to communities, but also to really ask ourselves the honest questions: what parts of a community are we excluding? Especially in heritage sites, in conflict settings, we have the issue of displaced communities. The UNHCR has warned last year already that this will be the decade of displacement. The numbers have risen to 100 million. That was even before the horrendous floods in Pakistan that have left a third of the country underwater and 33 million being displaced. So I think there, in that setting, the international community plays a key role to support countries that are in conflict, also as host countries, as welcoming countries, considering and respecting that people have the right to be protected, but they also have a right to belong, and they also have a right for their knowledge and their expertise to be heard. And I think this is something where we can get better as an international community. And then it's quite interesting to have that talk between the generations, because I think we all also had a different entry into the World Heritage field. And as I am coming quite freshly, I had the opportunity, because of all the work that had been done before, to study World Heritage, to look at how the idea of a convention had been materialized, how it developed further, and what were the negative and positive impacts of that. And I could sit here and just repeat the research of what has gone wrong. But in the end, I think I will have the same story. I will create ideas, I will implement them, and then in 20, 30, 50 years, people will reflect on that. So I think it's, at this point, we need to have a lot of grace. We need to listen to each other. We need space to change. That also means we need change management from the leadership side, to be able to take people on board. And then at the end, tools like crisis management, navigating through a crisis, understanding conflicts and how they are tied to our heritage setting, how we might reproduce conflicts through our heritage. Yeah, that would be my wish and aim for the next 50 years.
Thank you. Birgitta.
Yeah, maybe I look back a little bit again. In 2016, I mentioned that this morning, we had a conference on the Syrian heritage, and you, Elisabeth, you attended this conference as well. And there was, in 2016, there was a lot of hope in the room, but in the end, we see it more or less a little bit only happened. At that time, and that was a very sensitive political discussion even in this house, in the Federal Foreign Office. Normally, we are not allowed to have direct contact, for instance, to our colleagues in Syria. But in 2016, we managed that the officials of the GJRM were allowed to come to Berlin, as well as the Syrian diaspora. And we find a way to discuss the way ahead. And the heritage, really the heritage, nothing else, was a basis for communication. And I myself, I'm living at the weekend normally in a city, in a historic city, in a historic town, which was destroyed. 60% of this historic city was destroyed in the last days of the Second World War. And the first thing what the people in this historic town managed was to rebuild the churches and the historic houses with the support of the Allies, in this case the British Army and the Belgian Army. But they were convinced that they have to save, to conserve, and to take care for the heritage. And if you look at the, there are a lot of documentation, and if you look to this documentation, I have sometimes the feeling we are more or less in the same situation, that we have to find a common layer to look together ahead. And I think in such situations, heritage really has a decisive role. And I like to underline again, we could focus with the World Heritage List and with the World Heritage Sites to this task. But and the World Heritage Convention is not only about the World Heritage Site, it is also about the heritage on the national, which is important on the regional and national and even local level. Therefore, again, it is heritage as a whole, and we use World Heritage for focusing the political interest. But we have to look to heritage as a whole, not only to World Heritage.
Okay, thank you. Mechtlid.
Yeah, I would agree with Birgitta. It's not, World Heritage is a Vorreiterrolle, as we say in German. It's really an avant-garde project from its beginning, but it stands for all heritage in the world. But what I would like to see is that people raise their voices in defense of World Heritage wherever these people are, whether local communities, indigenous peoples, a person within the World Heritage system, from a state party, from an NGO. Because we have so many sites under threat. We have only 50-something sites on the heritage in danger list, but many sites under threat, and they need more assistance, they need more help. And I think if the voices are raised, we maybe join forces and to get a better world.
Thank you. Come on, Carlos.
So what I hope is that I think this is something that needs to start in the World Heritage Committee, that we denationalize the idea of heritage, really impose the concept and rescue this idea that heritage belongs to everybody, and heritage does not have an allegiance to any political situation. And on the other hand, I also wish that to see that there are more avenues and more spaces opened up for this exchange between different nationalities to occur, and to everybody can find heritage as a unifying bonding factor that brings together and bridges through nations and creates peace, which is the intention of the World Heritage Convention. So this is, I think, what
Thank you. And Lazar, you have the last word.
No, after they have said everything. So, and that's the beauty of being the last one, is that you get inspired by others. I think I like to say two important things. First of all, because we discuss the role of World Heritage in times of peace, conflict and war, the subject that brought us today. I think I would like World Heritage to continue to be the source of resilience. That World Heritage continue to connect the different cultures of the world as it used to do, but not to divide. I think if we keep this noble idea, we will continue paying tribute to the founders of this important text that we think it's still relevant today, like Mechtlid was saying, by reading the preamble. And the second thing I like to say is that there are global challenges that 50 years ago did not exist. And I think because of its leading role as an instrument, and because World Heritage has this universal, a power concept to connect, to bring people, to create bonds, that World Heritage plays its role in helping to deal with the global challenges that our humanity is facing. We name them. One of them is climate change. And I think we have to play a role in this conflict. We have to play a role. Even we can play a role in the challenges like we have seen with the COVID-19 that we had. And I'm saying all this to finish because what we would like to see as heritage professionals, as UNESCO, and also as a civil society and government, it's this noble, that this noble idea continue to exist and continue to get into our minds, we men and women, and that we use it to say that, okay, this is the reason why we are human. This is why we need to protect our diversity. And that makes the sense of us existing in this world. And we've seen it when we saw the world shaking, when the mausoleums of saints in Timbuktu were about to be destroyed. We've seen it when Palmyra was about to be destroyed. We feared with the Taliban. We feared in Mosul. And we are fearing the situation in Ukraine. So I think if it can mobilize us, then that's the sense of World Heritage for the future. And we as UNESCO, we commit ourselves to continue facilitating the cooperation in the spirit of the multilateralism that we all share.
Thank you very much to this wonderful panel for your contributions and your insights, and thanks to you for your patience. And I think you still have something to...
Yes, I think there is some announcement to be made. Patricia Albert made a webpage for Birgitta Ringbeck, where many of your friends wrote and put photos and so. So I really would like to give you a card from all the friends, and Patricia will come with the webpage. Thank you very much. And thanks for all your work, Birgitta.
Thank you very much, but this meeting and this conference is dedicated to the World Heritage Convention and the 50th anniversary of the convention. But thank you very much. It's really great that my work is acknowledged in this way. And the questions, the key question of the last years, days and the last weeks to me were, what you are going to do now. And I assure you, I will not come back as a Silberrücken or something like an elder statesman. So the first thing I like to announce is I like to be lazy in the next weeks and months, because I worked a lot. Therefore, that is the answer of my question, or of your questions. So I will, I think, enjoy my life, and a little bit without World Heritage. I like to go to World Heritage sites, but undercover.
Wish you all the best. Okay, we give back then, I think, to the organizers. No? Okay, there are, yeah, Absagen. Okay, yeah, we due to time management, we cannot open the question round for the audience. This is understood. What is the next point in the agenda? Are we? Okay. So we're sorry that we have expanded a bit, but I think it was very interesting to hear these different voices, to have all of you here, and thank you very much for this wonderful podium.
So is my floor now. Thank you very much. I don't know what to say because everything what I have on my paper here has already been said. So I do not go again into the discussion and into the questions. But what I have to say is, first of all, we have talked a lot about the World Heritage Studies program in Cottbus. And we have a lot of students here, former students here and current students here. And I have to say here, it was the idea of Mechtlid Rössler to create this program, and this was in 1998. I remember that. Do you remember? Yes. So, Mechtlid. This is very important for me, you know, to say it, because after that you was in Cottbus several times and you gave classes and things like that. So thanks a lot again for this support. And then, you know, I do not repeat all the very interesting and important ideas and messages which have been given, but I have to say thank you to a variety of people and members of our team. I start with the current and former students in Cottbus. Look there, they are the volunteers which help. Which helped us to organize this event today, and thanks to your support, we managed it very, very well. Secondly, I have to say thank you to Sandra Nasser. Where is she? Already gone? No. Sandra was the manager of this conference here, and thanks to her so that we could arrange it. And also, I have to say thank you. Also, I have to say thank you to Claudia Grünberg, the Vice Director of the Institute Heritage Studies. She is and was during 2 years behind all our activities, and you know, it was day and night when we could call her and say, we need you, help us, and she was there. So, also, thanks to you, it was really great to have you and to still have you, yeah. So that's it. I do not repeat, as I mentioned before, what has been said already, and I think it does not make sense to make a new reflection. So thank you very much to all of you. It was really interesting, and it is a long time ago that I had such an inspiring event, conference, with such inspiring discussions, presentations, and reflections. Thank you. And now, you know, our wonderful meeting over there is open. You can find something to eat. You can find something to drink, including not champagne, Sekt we say in Germany. What is Sekt in English? I don't know. But you find it over there. And what I want to mention also is, you know, the book is available. The book is in the internet, and it has been, meanwhile, it has been downloaded 40,000 times. I thank you very much, and I see you over there. You're welcome.